drive to it was just a mess. Yesterday I spent the whole day in traffic. It was not nice. Okay. So I have to find a good way. When I get home, it's like my life is now dependent on ECG in some way. It's not very nice. Okay. So let's repeat so that this is captured, right? So anytime you are creating a server, right, the server is going to be using, you have to make sure that you import Java Net and Java IO. The IO for the output stream, the net for the server socket. Right. So you can specify a port. In this case, it's saying it's going to be listening on 6013. Right. What some programs will do is before they start, they can randomly search for a port. That's possible. You can make a program which, when starting, will randomly search for a port and use it to listen. Right. And then once the port is available, it will start accepting connections. But it doesn't mean that it will accept one connection and close. This is in a while loop, meaning it will run forever, while true. So every time the server will be what? Running, listening for connections. If a client requests a connection, this server will create an output stream similar to what you have for system.out or printline and can send any data. So it means if you wanted to send a file from one computer to another, you just have to what? Open the file and then what? Read the contents, pass it to the writer, that's print line, print, and the client can what? Receive all of it and then store it to a file. So you can use this for so many things. But for this project, what you have to think of is what commands do I need to send over from the client to the server? If you are controlling someone's mouse, so now I hope people can start to see some solutions. If you are controlling a mouse, that means that one application will be what? Sending some coordinates, maybe XY coordinates. If it's a keyboard, some application will be sending some keystrokes to the other machine. If it is to monitor a service, that means that someone will be what? Reading something from the machine. Maybe at the beginning, you would read some information about the machine and send it over to the other side. So as far as client server, in your design, you don't always have to say something is always a server. You can have an application where some parts of it are acting as server, some parts are acting as client, so that it can send or what? Receive information. So the server will be sending information, and the client will be what? Receiving. But you can have a program which both sends and receives. And we're talking about threads next, so that you can have an application that can start different threads who will be what? Sending and receiving different things. Are people cool? Question?
So I just wonder about if the client authentication or something, where does the client actually go to?
Okay, so this is the client's part. Right. For the client part, this is also from the text as well. What it will be focusing on is specifying, and this is the host and port. 127.0.0.1 is local host. But if you do it well, that means that now, if even the machines are on, the things are on different machines, so long as the client specifies what? The server's address on the other machine, and the firewall is open, it can send information from one person's machine to another person's machine. It's also why you're working in groups, so that if at least two people in the group can bring or use their laptops, they can at least test to see if what? From one machine to another, you can send information across. Just in your Windows or Linux, you have to turn off the firewall. Well, not only turn it off, but allow certain ports to go through. Right. So if you are sending and it's not working, there may be something is blocking the port. Right. So you can test on a single machine, make sure it's working. This is very similar to the server socket code, right? It's just similar, starting off by saying, I want to create a socket. That's my input stream. And you realize that here, he is also going to create an input stream based on the connection he's getting. So at this point, when he says get input stream, that is when it would start to what? Connect to and use the servers, what the server will be sending. And finally, it does read line. This is similar to reading from a file, right? You just get a string, so it does what? Read line. The only thing is this thing is printing out the line it's reading. But you don't have to print out. You can process it in some way. It might be a command, it might be, you can, once you read the line, decide, okay, I am going to what? Maybe create a file, copy something, get some resource. Right. So between this and the first one, you have enough code. So if I were you today, I'll try it out. Right. Try out and see, okay, server, client, this code right here, can you send information from one to the other? So, okay, question.
information like I'm trigger and all the people have without having to open sockets.
Okay, so a lot of the things that we are doing, you can do it in many, many ways. We are just using sockets. Sockets are very lightweight. Note that it's much more lightweight than even a web connection. But it's something that's actually in use by many applications. It means he doesn't need to have, and you can try on some of the new machines in the lab. These days, when they are running, they'll do things like refuse to run certain services, just because depending on the permissions on the machine, things may be blocked. You may not even have the capability, or you may not have the space. Do you want to run a whole database server on, like, if you make an application, we all make applications. Are we all going to run hundreds of database servers on people's machines? So sockets, if something is just sending some information over, collecting some information, sockets are very efficient. Right. So there are many things that rely on sockets. I know people have all these synchronizing files across, they'll be using sockets. Databases themselves, like if you take MySQL, when he starts, he says, I have a port to use. Meaning, even that, he's also using a socket. Except for a database management system, it has many other features that just does with data management. For ours, we are just saying, allow two processes to communicate to accomplish a task. Right? So yes, you can, but this is very lightweight. We are not requiring, at the end of the day, the executable here should be less than 1 megabyte. Your normal MySQL, I don't know if you've checked, it's, 200 meg and so on. But you can have a very small application, even less than a kilobyte, that can just quickly, it should be able to. That can, do these simple tasks. Right. So I hope you understand. So there are many ways you can do it, but we're just using this for this class. You can also even use a web server if you want. Like Apache is running somewhere, someone clicks and then Apache will do it on your behalf. That's possible as well. But we are using this approach. Okay, that means that, so it's possible, so there are two parts I'll answer to this. It's possible to have, for example, a Java, the server will be Java, the client will be C++. Sockets don't care about the programming language. That's a nice thing. So different parts may be coded in different programming languages. The other part is, as far as the command, you can use plain text. Like if you wanted to move the mouse to a certain location, you can just think of, so this is almost like programming language design. Come up with, okay, if I send this instruction, then the mouse should move here. Or if I send this instruction, this key should be set. Right? So that means you are left to come up with whichever, like, how you would compose the commands. Someone could have something like press key, space, what it is. Someone could just say, okay, I'm just going to send the character. And when I send that character over, it should run on the other side. Right? So there are going to be some ways that you have to think of encapsulating your commands or formatting your commands so that the client and server can communicate. Right? It means two people will have different servers and clients unless you all agree to use the same standard. Like the way HTTP, the way it works is they have all agreed on what commands will be sent and will be received. So even if Chrome does it, Chrome knows that it will work. If Firefox does it, they know it will work. If IE does it, they know it will work. But right now, most of you are just going to come up with your own schemes for sending and receiving information. Right. So, question?
The VMware and the guys don't know about and the external mouse is
The VMware approach is a little bit different, but yeah, it's going to work something similar to that. Now, if you look carefully at the settings for VirtualBox or VMware, that's my VirtualBox, you will find, you will definitely find the ability to even watch the screen of one machine from another. Let's see if settings will give me that. So under display, for example, there's remote display where you can specify, so enable server, where you can run a viewing server from one machine to another, so someone can view what screen you are on. So when you click, that means that from one machine to another. But I think all they'll do is just monitor the screen, and when you click, can send it over to the underlying server. So you are right, you can do this. The services are using this. VMware and such, they are using this. Now, throughout the system, let me see if I can remember some of these. Okay, so there's a command called netstart. That is net. And what it does is it can list the different ports that are open or running on a system. Just change this, make the screen a little bit, increase the font size. Right. So even though you may not think your machine has ports that are open and are running, a lot of the applications that are on your computer, you can see a lot of 3306. It means I probably have some MySQL running. But you can see other ports that are going, and even some that are, so you see, things are opening, closing. So every machine, it does require or use a lot of sockets and ports to communicate with the different components of the machine. Right? If it's on one machine, it's a very nice way to communicate. Right? And it will be a little bit better than file I/O, because if you are doing a file, someone has to write the file before what? Someone will read from the file. But with the sockets, once someone connects, the information will flow over. You don't need to store it somewhere. Just send information over. All right. So every machine does have sockets that are opening and closing. All right. So any question on the client server before we move on to today's threads? All right. So everyone is cool. Right. So what you have to do is type out this code. You will need it. Test out to make sure that what your client and server, they are running and you are happy. Right. Now, the next part that you need for your code. So I'm going to review what we did from last time. So, come on, my code. I know someone said you should be able to make this bigger. Okay, tools. Work. Okay, cool. That worked. I'm kind of happy. I think I just froze this. Alright, so last time what we said was you can run threads if your class implements what? Runnable. So using threads is something that I'll encourage people to learn how to use because it's very useful. Right? You can accomplish many things if you start to think of things in an encapsulated way. Say, I have this code that performs this task. But the problem is usually most of the applications you have, either it just runs from one beginning to end. It doesn't have any branches. Right? You just write a code, it runs from beginning to end. But you have to start thinking of, I want to start writing code where two things can be going on at the same time, or three things are going on at the same time. So for example, your resource monitor has monitoring resources on a machine. Periodically, what it can do is what? Maybe you have for each resource you are monitoring some thread, that will be what? Running periodically, you will wake up and check, how much hard disk do I have? It will store the information somewhere. It will run, how much hard disk do I have? So, all of these, you can't really do this without threads. Okay. So, what we have here is something that's runnable. Anytime you implement runnable, you will have to implement this method called run. Right? And what run means is it's the starting point of the thread, similar to your main. So when you start a Java class, it goes straight to main and runs it. So if you have a class that is running threads, that means that it will go what? Straight to run and run it when you ask the thread to start. So all this code here, if I wanted to use the class, all I need to do is make an instance of that class. So I have, for example, a class that I call my Java application, which is a runnable. And I have another class that is my Java application 2. And all you need to do is what? Make a thread passing your class instance to it. Right. Now, this thing, you can use it for a lot of creative things. For example, you can have, just because your application should be doing this, right? Maybe public string. My Java skills have depleted. yes, they have really depleted because too many languages now. And so I start to remember, is that a capital S or the small s one? Okay. All right. What was that method called? Or what was that thing called? My name? Or no? No. Hey, have I forgotten this? Okay, so Java people, just make a string. That is how we make a string, right?
Yes.
Fine. Right. If I want to access it, I should just say whatever it is on my name.
Just mention the name of the.
Huh, shouldn't. No, that's not the one. Did I put in the wrong place? Okay, I think I found it. It was in the wrong class. Right. So this one, so please note that I don't just want to, in name, just writing my name won't work. Right? I hope people realize that. It's a very good exam question. Not for my class, but anyway. You can't type my name because in static, you don't have access to things that you instantiate. So I can't just access it by typing my name. What I have to do is, you have to instantiate one of them. I hope everyone is up with me. Right, okay. So I have to instantiate one of them and then, right, put it in there. Right. So it means that if you are designing your application, you can have some classes where before you start, you can change some parameters. Right? Or you can set some properties before the thread starts to run. I hope people are cool with this concept. Maybe you have something that's supposed to monitor a hard drive. Right? So before you start, you can specify and say, okay, I want to monitor C drive. I want to monitor it every 3 seconds. So there are certain parameters, some behavior for the class, but you don't want to what? You don't want to hard code everything in order to make it more dynamic and modular. So if I were you, this thing you could actually finish in a day just by having, because you realize that all you have is communicating from one process to another using socket. And the person who is receiving, all the things they are doing, if it's resource monitoring, is very similar. All he needs to do is figure out which resource am I monitoring, how often do I monitor it, what command do I execute. Some of these can be stored within some properties of the class. So that to even add more services, it shouldn't be a lot of effort. It should just be, okay, how do I run a command to do this? I'll just set the property and then it will run. Right. So starting, I think the first one is maybe the easiest. That doesn't mean everyone should pick that one. Starting and stopping. Right. Or even if you said, okay, I want to be able to control the screen, the mouse, it just means that at the very beginning, I'll just quickly decide which commands or which methods I want to run and use some parameters to decide how the class will behave. Are people understanding that concept? So if it's, let's say you are writing a MySQL server, it shouldn't just always be hard-coded. I know in the text, the port and everything is hard-coded. But for your design, to make it easy for you to deploy your solution across, what some people do is, at the beginning, when they start, they can, by code, specify the behavior. I want this port, I want this socket. It's much easier to design it this way than to hard-code it right there. And what some people will even go further to do, really encourage this, you can even have a configuration file. That's why all the servers like Apache and so on, they have a configuration file. The moment the code starts to run, it's going to open the file, read certain properties, and then use it to instantiate the classes so that the developer doesn't have to keep going back to the code to hard code things. It makes testing very easy. So someone will say, okay, can we test it on another machine? Do you have to recompile the whole thing? It's kind of a lot, right? So you can say, okay, I have a file. In the file, maybe the first thing is the port, the second thing is maybe the location. You can have some nice, beautiful, we'll be grading on all of this. I'll be looking at it to say, how happy am I? Would I buy your product? And hopefully when we finish, we can go and sell to some departments, right? And we can. Okay, so suppose, for example, like the resource monitor, those who are monitoring, so we can pick each of them. Right. So there are 3 parts. So the first people are going to be running services and monitoring the services. Right. So maybe Apache is running, but right now, for most people, what we don't have, and you can look at Apache's the example that's there. You can't, for example, quickly say, show me all of how many times someone requested to run and stop Apache, MySQL. You have all these services running. But you need to monitor them to see, oh, is it running, is it not running? Right. So one simple way is you can have one thread monitoring Apache, one thread monitoring MySQL. And this, if you go and work for some people, it will come and hunt you where someone will say, oh, the web server has crashed, and maybe you didn't know. So what you're doing is you're going to run a thread that will periodically check to see if the service is running. So one thread can be monitoring the web server, one thread can be monitoring your database, one thread can be monitoring the mail. So it means that at the same time, 3 things are running within your code. So that's why we like to use threads. Right. So if you pick something like Firefox or Chrome and so on, right. So there are 2 links that I'll put up. I think they are here. Okay. So I search for, the best links that there are. I wouldn't say, not the best. So please don't come and kill me if you made like a web page about sockets. I just went to the official Oracle page and picked the 2 best. One for sockets. I'll put this up. Right. One for sockets and one for threads. Right. You are encouraged to go through. Right. And it does more than the textbook does, actually. It goes through in detail, very fine detail. So it means if I'm downloading something, so those of you who are thinking of how those download managers work, what they'll do is, when you are downloading, it says it's downloading 3 or 4 things at once, right? So what you can do is you can start one thread to download the first part, second thread to download the second part, third thread to download the third part, another thread for the fourth, and what? More or less now can download in parallel. So one is downloading one part, second part, third, fourth. And when they finish, they what? They merge the components and you can have your big file. Right? So threads can be very useful in many, many scenarios. Another is even this. You have all these that are running. Each of these can be threads. Question?
Yes. So, if initiating socket request from a Linux virtual machine, does it go out as Windows commands or Linux commands?
Okay, so remember, sockets don't care whether or not it's Windows or Linux. Socket just says someone wants to make a connection. So you can actually do a socket. So if you have a client and server, and one is on Linux, one is on Windows, they will still communicate if the socket is open. So sockets are not stuck to one platform. By language or even OS, it's not stuck to it. Which is why it can also be very useful for a developer. So you can have a front end that is written in Java and a back end that is written in C#, or vice versa. So you can do a lot of this. Right? For people who are doing final projects, this happens a lot, where someone will say, oh, I have an application, but I know Java will do this part well, and C# will do this part well, and maybe Python will do this part well. The solution is what? Sockets. And every year, nobody wants to touch sockets, but that is the solution. Right? Because if you want to send information from one to the other, that means when the PHP finishes, you can send information with sockets to another part, which then what? Runs whatever is needed. Maybe someone is saying, I want to do voice. Someone is talking on the microphone. It's supposed to be sent to another part. Well, sockets can work. If they both need to be running, why is it that you are thinking, oh, everything has to be in one language? Operating systems are not in one language. Many, many languages are running on it. Your browser connects to the web server. It doesn't need to know whether it's a Linux web server or not. It just connects over some port and gets information. So socket is a way to really put your tools and modules together. All right. So back to the excitement. Okay. So that's my second advice for you. The next part is the difference between start and run. So if a thread has been created, so this is creating a thread. So it means I instantiated all the contents of it. It's running. If I say start, that means that it will go and run that run method that is within that class. Right? So what if I wanted to have something that is shared across 2 classes? So this is now getting disgusting, but we'll talk about it right now. Remember in Java, so I'll do this. Class my message. In Java, what we normally do when we want to share is what? To simply pass a reference from one to the other. Or you have a variable, you assign a reference to it. So maybe if I wanted, so this is some object that I want to share between what? 2 threads. The simple way to do it is I'm going to create right? That is one. And then in the other class, this is another class, I'm going to put, again, one of these, And so that means if I want to share across the two, the two. I've created the first class, MJ1, second class, MJ2. All of them have this so my message, my message, and then I'm going to do MJ2 is equal to So you can what? Since Java has this pass by reference approach, if two things need to share something, this is one approach to it. Right. Though we'll point out very soon that this is not it's not a very safe one. Because what? If you have two threads that are running, when especially they are trying to change the resource, there will be competition for the item. I hope people are understanding. Because now you have two things that are running. Now, for most people, they may get away with this, right? And that's because if you have a single core machine, maybe only one is running at any point in time, maybe you get away with it. So we did have cases like this where you do something on your own machine, you are very happy. But yet when they take it to the client, it stops working because maybe the client has more cores or the way that things are running in a different order. But for the most part, for those doing single-threaded applications, this is fine. I'll just show you that this will work. So was 1. So instead of doing hello world, this guy can also do system.out.println class 1 plus there's message. So within it, since has been defined up here, he can use it and access it. Similarly, I think there's a second class. This is the second class, the run method. Right within the run, I can also say class 2 is saying message. Right? If I were to run this, I should find a way to make this part big as well. Oh, it's big. I hope it's it's working. Okay. So you can see that both of them are accessing the how are you from the the my message. Like this. Both of them are accessing that resource. So it's possible, even if you have multiple threads. So those people are wondering, I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 threads. How can they communicate? Before any thread starts running, they can share that resource. I hope people are understanding. Or people are not understanding what I'm saying. This is very important. So if you don't, in main, both classes want to share an object that is called my message. So all that has to happen is the first and second class, you just make a reference to that object. You've been doing this for your code. I don't know how complex it got. But if you are trying to have multiple modules or multiple classes, in order to share information, this is how you do it, right? Hey, are people with me, or is there anyone who doesn't understand what's going on? You are cool. You are not cool. Okay, so for example, if I have, let's say, this application that's running, right? And right now, you'd realize that throughout the system, for example, you can go to options, and when I go to options, I can set and say, I want the font to be something, I want right? All of these are there, right? Now, that means that it's possible for me, for example, to say, I want to create a class. That's if I were a developer, my configuration. And in that class, I can put in public string, let's say, font name. Public string font size. Sorry, font size is maybe, okay, I think double would be better, so I can do that. Color name. So I know sometimes maybe you just have one class, but sometimes you want to have something that is shared by multiple classes. So I have here, I'm sure that's how they coded it. This is one class, this is another class. So there are different classes that are pulling information from the same place. But sometimes they are not pulling from a file, right? But they are still running and they are sharing information. So what it means is that there has to be some class that contains some of this information that 2 or 3 classes can reference at the same time, right? So for example, if I wanted to share the configuration across the 2 threads that I have, I just need to what? Have, it's my configuration, right? To have this here, right? So I just make an object variable, well, a variable that will point to that object. And that means if within my main, the MJ2 one, I'll just do MJ2, right? So I have my configuration variable, okay, which is MC. Currently was null, but I can assign it to a new, right? I can do this. But the problem with doing this is then it's only stuck in one place. It's only within just that class. To share across different classes, I'll just create an instance and then assign the instance into one of the variables. So that within the class, when I access this variable, I can access that class that I created. So that's what I mean. If you have 3 or 4 classes that are running, then what you have to do is what? If you want to share information across, you may have to come up with some shared information which you can encapsulate in a class. And then have a reference that is what? Available within all the classes. So anytime they want to use it, they can access and use the information. Are people cool? I'm still getting views. You have to soak it. Alright, so I'll put up the two links, right? Now what you need at the end is to also create locks. It may not be necessary for this specific assignment. Class time is up, right? Hey, wait, the quiz. Okay, please. We have 10 more minutes to go. Alright, so today I ended up at how to make threads and what? How to share information amongst them. And please, if you look at the thread that's running, 2 different classes are printing at the same time. Class 1 says how are you, class 2 says how are you. And they all have different counters. One is counting in 10,000, one is counting in 20,000. So that means that you can now apply this concept to some of your problems where you have 2 or 3 things that are running at the same time. Right. In the next class, that's Monday, we'll look at how you can use locks. So the problem with sharing variables is sometimes when one person is writing to something, he has not finished writing, and the other class will try and overwrite it. So that means maybe you are supposed to write to a string, but as you are writing, someone overwrote what you were doing. Or you wrote at the same time, so there's gibberish in the variable. In order to solve that, we have to have locks. So a lock would be something that you check to see, do I have the right to access this before you touch the shared variable. So the next step is to add the lock. So on Monday, we'll add the lock. So on Friday, as group, so today, before you leave, please, you can pass around the sheet. And when the sheet goes around, please indicate which of the projects, Yes. Choices. Okay.
Yes, which ends by midnight, for instance.
So there'll be a choices up online, and you have to go on and pick which your first, second, and third choice. So if you are not in, we'll put you somewhere, right? But let's do this. So today, before you all go, draw for me what's that thing? That chart, the process state, the states of the process, right? That is the quiz, and also tell me the 3 types of schedulers that exist and what they are doing. So please. Just a sec, please. Say it again. Please close your laptops. Hey, you don't bring. Alright, so this is a good way to damage your screen, putting something. But it's not, yours is not hard. But yeah, some people break when they have a pen on it. That's why I was worried. Okay. So please, just 2 questions. First one is for the states. Draw the diagram, indicate the arrows. And the second one is the 3 types of schedulers and what they are doing. Please, not just the name. I want to know what they're doing. There are only 3 of them.